Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TMI. I have the great pleasure today of introducing you to one of our Rewind episodes, meaning this is a classic from the archives of TMI. This particular episode goes back to early 2020, February to be exact, and this is episode number 103. And this was high concept. Stick with me here. We discussed Jordan Peele's Us, along with what could be the all-time greatest giant bug movie, the 1954 classic Them, with exclamation point. So when I say high concept, just think about it. Us and Them. If only we had the rights to it, I would love to play that track right now from Dark Side of the Moon so it could build up slowly underneath my voice, but you'll just have to imagine it. So, let me get out of my own way, and without further delay, present to you episode 103, Us and Them.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
This episode is about us. Well, every episode is about us.
That's right. It's all about me.
This is the Jordan Peele, his second feature as a director, following up the amazing Get Out.
Get Out.
But a much more ambitious film, should we say? And this is more straight horror. Even though there are a lot of moments of levity in here, but it's more straight horror than Get Out was. And it deals with a lot of themes. It's very symbolic. It's going to give us a lot to chew on. So let's get into it.
So I feel like, am I going to be responsible for your therapy bills, Jeff, for making you watch this movie?
No, I actually have. So after, I'm a little more resilient than you give me credit for. I whine sometimes, and sometimes it's all just for the show because really, I'm game. But yeah, this was a movie that I probably could have gone the rest of my life and not really watched. But you know, you were a strong advocate for it, and you said to us, you know, just shut off your phone, close your door, and just invest 2 hours in this movie. Apparently, you know, obviously I watched it on TV. I didn't get to see it in the theater. And when I saw it, I mean, I watched it just on your recommendation. It was long before we decided to actually talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it immensely. Mm-hmm. And now I've gone back and I rewatched it, and there's a little bit of a story behind that. But yeah, no, it's surprising because it's not what you're expecting, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, and like Jim just said, Get Out was such an original and fresh. You know, he just had such a unique voice in that movie that you're like, all right, this guy's, you know, I'm on board. If his name's attached to something, I'm willing to see it. So,
yeah. And what I like about this and Get Out, it's almost seems like you're watching a long episode of The Twilight Zone because it
is a Twilight Zone episode, very much so.
Now, the interesting thing about watching Us is that, Jeff, I think you and I were maybe the last people on the planet to see it. Because it was a big hit. It only cost $20 million to make, and it made in excess of $250 million at the box office. But anybody that I mentioned, I talked about, we're going to be doing Us next week, even though it's not a new movie. We just never covered it.
Right.
Everybody that I mentioned that to has seen it. People that are not horror movie fans have seen it because this has made the rounds. It's on airplanes. You know, it's on cable now.
Yeah, it's on HBO. Yep.
So my dad saw it. You know, the guy that I work with who hates horror movies saw it. And he's like,
Yeah,
you're doing us. And then I'd be like, don't say anything. Stop right there. I haven't watched it yet. But yeah.
Shut your mouth.
Lots of people have seen it. Lots of people liked it from what I'm hearing. So,
all right. So in other words, we're late to the game. Well,
we're late. We're late to the game.
That's all right. Listen, there's somebody out there who has not seen it yet, and they will watch it and then come back and listen to this.
Now, this movie is filled with, I don't know if you want to call them Easter eggs, but just little gifts that Peele is leaving. And I loved, in the beginning, the very, very beginning of the movie, you're seeing like an old style TV screen, and there's a news report about Hands Across America.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which immediately dates it to 86.
86.
86,
yes.
Yeah.
So I think that they were trying to do Live Aid 2 with Hands Across America. It wasn't a concert, but it was all over MTV, and it was promoted very heavily to young people back then. Fighting hunger, everybody across the country is going to join hands from coast to coast. And I don't think they actually did it. I think it's
how
it broke down a few.
Right, I was going to say you got one river or railroad tracks, and the whole thing is screwed.
But regardless, this is what's on the TV when Us opens, and there are 3 video cassettes.
You caught it, yeah.
And you don't realize their significance until after you've watched the movie.
You caught it.
But the first one I saw, just because the letters are the biggest, is Chud.
Chud. Mm-hmm.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Any kid that had cable in the 80s saw Chud multiple times because maybe it was cheap for cable companies to buy and show.
I just remember the VHS box with the sewer cover, slightly ajar with the hands coming out kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to get Chud and the Stuff all mixed up in my head, but they are very much two separate.
Chud Stuff.
Then we have Steve Martin's The Man with Two Brains.
Yep.
Also ties in heavily with this movie once you realize what's going on. Then we also have The Goonies, which I didn't really get. Maybe it's just because he likes that movie.
They're underground. No, because they're underground.
Is that simply that's all it was? Underground?
Yes, because the Goonies are underground. There's actually a line late in the movie that's a direct reference to the Goonies. When we get there, I was
waiting for somebody to say, "Hey, you guys!" No, it didn't happen.
Yeah,
this is our time.
Yes, but it's twisted a little bit. It's late in the movie. When we get there,
I didn't pick up on that. But then,
I did not pick up on that either.
But that
so
is.
I've watched this movie like 5 times already. So
okay, all right. Well,
because the more you watch it.
Yes.
This is one of those movies that rewards multiple viewings. So,
I agree with you on that because, like I said, I watched it the first time, I enjoyed it, and then I didn't really think I was going to get a chance to watch it again before we recorded. And I'm like, well, let me just, jot down some notes, and I ended up going down the rabbit hole that is IMDb and user reviews. That was ugly. And I immediately was like, I need to go back and rewatch this because I'm agreeing with 3/4 of what they're posting. So I came in this with ulterior motives on the second viewing.
So now there is a 4th tape there, but it's a do-it-yourself blank VHS tape that has the label Tuesday Night, I think it said.
Yeah.
So
it was on Tuesday nights back in 1986. Family Ties?
Perhaps.
So I don't know, but Jordan Peele said in an interview that everything in this movie has a meaning. Unless you don't like it, then it doesn't mean anything.
Then it doesn't. Then it's an accident.
It means something to me.
It's just coincidence. Yeah. That's how it begins. So there's significance there. So that never leaves your mind. Like, when are they going to tie in Hands Across America?
Right.
At some point.
Yeah, the groundwork has all been laid right there. But let's go back even further, because that opening prologue that talks about 3 lines of text that just show up on the screen talking about the fact that there are thousands of miles of abandoned mines, subway cars, train stations throughout America, and that nobody knows what they're used for.
Right. And then they could have easily put in dun 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 after that line came up. Yeah. So then we get the backstory of our main character, Adelaide. And she's on the boardwalk in Santa Cruz with her parents. And her dad wins her a Michael Jackson Thriller T-shirt.
Isn't Santa Cruz where Lost Boys takes place too?
There's a Lost Boy reference.
Right.
There's a reference in the movie because his wife, Adelaide's mom, says they're filming something over by the carousel.
Oh,
Did you guys catch it?
Yes. No, why don't you go over and see if you can get a cameo? That is a weird throwaway
that
line.
Would be, and that would be time appropriate as well.
Wait, when did that come out? 87?
87.
87. So I guess, I guess they're filming it. Wow.
On these bonus
this
features.
is a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
This is such a gorgeous scene at the beginning when they're at the boardwalk because, everybody's like screaming. People are supposedly happy, right? There's like the sounds of games, the sounds of rides, but it just feels oppressive. And part of the reason is because Adelaide's parents are just
fighting.
Arguing, continuously.
Yeah.
So there's already sort of this taint.
And you're seeing a lot of that from her point of view.
Right.
Yeah, even
literally
the camera.
walking literally walking behind the parents at light height level. And she really doesn't have much to say. The dad.
And of course she wants to wander away.
Very
of course,
much like a jerk.
So, the mother goes off to the bathroom. The dad starts playing whack-a-mole.
Wait, we gotta talk about this whack-a-mole. And I can't take credit for this, but one of the IMDb reviews starts and ends with this whack-a-mole scene. And if you actually once you see it, you can't unsee it. The dad, doesn't know how to play whack-a-mole because when he's whacking, he's only hitting one hole the whole time. Like he doesn't move trying to chase around the mole. He's just hitting the same hole. Like he's the worst actor in the world.
No, but he's been drinking.
He's been drinking.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
That he's just drunk?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty funny because
if that's your strategy for whack-a-mole, you are going to hit it probably, 40-50% of the time.
Nah, I don't know. That's not how I play whack-a-mole. But I thought it was pretty funny.
I thought that was because, he's been drinking, which is the source of
tension.
One of their sources of tension is because he's like, can't I just have a beer?
I think he's more talented than we're giving him credit for at whack-a-mole.
I challenge him to a whack-a-mole contest right here, right now.
So Adelaide wanders off. And they're on the boardwalk. They're right next to the beach. There's steps going down to the beach. And she walks past this homeless guy who has a sign that says Jeremiah 11:11. Not the first time that you're going to see this guy or a reference to this verse. She wanders across the beach and then comes across a fun house, which is bizarrely set up on the beach and not on the boardwalk itself.
Yep.
And it's also not staffed. Like there's no one at the door.
There's like
no tickets needed apparently, and it's open and it's
running.
So she wanders in.
Zoltar?
Yeah. It's very biggish, right? It's this scene, but it's a little bit more sinister. So she wanders in, and it's like a Native American kind of themed. Lots of trees, and there's an owl that comes out. The most boring fun house that you could probably think of.
But, the unfun house, right?
But it is when you're in there by yourself, as we are with Adelaide.
Oh yeah, because there's also a storm. Like as soon as she walks inside, all hell breaks loose as a storm. So it's pouring rain.
Yeah, and there's a mirrored chamber where some of the lights go down, and then the emergency lights come up, and she can't get out, even though she sees the exit sign because the mirrors are throwing her off. And this is where we see her doppelganger for the first time. We first think that maybe it's a reflection, but then you realize she's facing it, and the reflection is not faced towards her, but it's her in height, in dress, hairstyle. It's her. So she approaches, the music builds, the tension builds, and then the scene cuts.
And I should point out, because it's actually important later, that when she's alone inside the funhouse, she starts whistling to herself.
Itsy Bitsy Spider.
Yeah, she starts whistling a little tune, almost the way kids do, to keep the monsters away.
And then we get a mini flash forward where Adelaide is safe back with her parents, and they're arguing again because she hasn't spoken since this incident. So apparently what happened, nothing untoward's happened that we know of. She walked out of the fun house and found her parents again, or her father found her. One of the two. You don't see it happen. But you see her at doctor's appointments, and they're trying to figure out why she's not talking. And apparently it takes quite a long time for her to get to anywhere back to close to normal again. And then a little bit later, you see her as a grown woman, and she has a family, and they are going on vacation. And that is the setup for the rest of the movie after the backstory of Adelaide. Now, so she's got a family, a husband, Gabe, and 2 kids, a girl and a boy.
I so relate to this dad. He's just such a doof.
I love him. I love him so much in this movie.
Yes, agreed. You know, they get to the camp or whatever, and she's like, "There's no internet." And he goes, "You don't need the internet. You have the outer net." And I'm like, "That's a great dad joke right there."
Now this is Winston. This is Winston Duke, who we all know from Black Panther and Infinity War and Endgame. So a big player in the Marvel universe, and I recognized him right away.
I love him so much in this movie because he's obviously like just such a nerd. You know, and he's such a big, sort of physically intimidating guy.
Yeah,
but because his personality is so goofy, he can't actually be intimidating.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think the glasses play a large part, especially when we start getting deeper into the story.
Later,
Yeah. But, you know, with the glasses, and he's got that Clark Kent kind of doofus mentality about him, that he's always pushing the glasses up, and he's always, you know, he carries himself differently.
And according to Jordan Peele and those bonus features, that's kind of the way that Winston Duke is. So,
Oh, really? Just kind of like that doofy, laid back.
So they're going on vacation, and where are they going? Santa Cruz, or right around Santa Cruz.
You think that she would have at least said straight up, "Can we go somewhere else?"
I don't want to go here because let's not even.
Oh, we're gonna go right next to it, but I'm still not going to the beach.
Right, and as I mentioned, they've got 2 kids. The daughter, who's in her early tweens, Zora, and then the smaller boy, the slightly younger than the daughter. So he's probably around 10 or 11, and his name is Jason.
Yeah.
So this is the family unit. And again, as we talked, there's some jokes around a busted boat that Gabe has. Now, he is really competing with his quote-unquote friend.
I wouldn't call that guy your friend.
No, I wouldn't either. To the most annoying characters.
He's like a nemesis. It's like you're anti.
Yeah, well, this is clearly Adelaide's family's summer home that they're going to, because there's like all of her sort of family mementos all around the house. So, and they haven't been there since Adelaide's mother died.
Right.
Because Gabe says that.
Yep.
But yeah, Gabe clearly like has aspirations towards wealth that their friends
have
clearly possess.
Right.
He's always, you know, he's got the boat. You know, later on, like he talks about their car and, you know,
the house.
The house. Like he really, and their friends, Kitty and Josh, are so obnoxious.
Are terrible.
They are. Yeah.
Now, apparently, this is like a joint vacation because they're at their summer house as well. Simultaneously. And this is what sparks the argument between Adelaide and Gabe, because Gabe wants to go meet this couple at the beach at Santa Cruz, the very same beach that Adelaide had her trauma at as a kid. And she's never told Gabe this. So he's unaware of why this is affecting her. And she absolutely puts her foot down. She does not want to go, but he talks her into it. And,
so her entire life, she's never gone back to this beach, even though her mom's house is right there.
Correct. And Christina, to your point, I don't believe that either Gabe or Adelaide like this other couple at all, but Gabe just has this thing where he needs to impress them, he needs to one-up them, and that's why he wants to go. And Adelaide is just going to have to suffer through Kitty at the beach while he's doing this.
And she is insufferable.
Yes, she is. Played by Elizabeth Moss.
It was outstanding.
Yes.
In this movie, just the playing this part, she's so deeply unlikable.
She gets a bit more likable later on, but she's but we'll get there. But
I love the way they talk to each other, even, you know, where she asks for a drink and he makes her drink and he says, "What do you say?" And she says, "I hate you."
Right. Yeah. Actually got a laugh out of my wife.
Yeah. Then as he's out of earshot, or maybe not, she confesses to Adelaide how she wants to murder him.
I've thought about killing him a couple times. I think we've all been there.
But she also says, talks about, sort of how her life was ruined by the birth of her children, that, her sort of career aspirations fell to the wayside because the twins came along at the wrong time. And, but all throughout this conversation, Adelaide is just tense. She just can't relax while they're talking. And Kitty's talking about, cosmetic surgery she's had done, right. And all.
Oh, you look just the same as you did last year, she said, which I thought was a great line.
So it's weird because as much as you get the sense that Gabe and Adelaide don't like them, it's not so much on Adelaide's part, but Gabe really aspires to this family. And there's, they're a family of 4, as they are. Yep. Right. As we said, they have twins, girls, two girls. Twins always creepy in a movie, always. So this is the scene on the beach. It's the nervous titter kind of laugh, but this is still a tense scene. Yes,
because like Christina said before, which was, Adelaide is jittery. She's not comfortable in her own skin. She doesn't want to go to the beach to begin with, and the way that he's shooting this. With these quick cuts and this fidgetiness of her, it just builds up the tension that you're like, all right, something's going to drop, like something's going to happen.
And of course, that funhouse is still there, and they are within, they're very close to it, wherever their spot is on the beach. Of course, Jason wanders off to go to the bathroom, and walks past the vicinity of the funhouse.
But that's not the most significant thing that he sees.
No, it's not. It's not. Right. We see someone, a disheveled man, looking very much like the homeless man that we've seen at the beginning of the movie. You don't see his face. His back is turned to Jason, just as the mysterious figure in the funhouse, her back was turned to Adelaide, but he notices that there's blood dripping from his hand.
We should mention that earlier when they were sort of pulling into the parking lot, there was an ambulance they were putting someone into the ambulance. It was a person who was dead, and he was holding the Jeremiah 11:11 sign to his chest.
Right.
So, yeah. And the guy who's standing there with his hand dripping, he's not moving. He has both of his hands out to his sides.
Yeah.
He's a little early.
Yeah, he was early to he's like, oh, that's tomorrow? What?
He didn't get the memo. Yeah, he did not get the memo.
Apparently not.
Adelaide completely loses her mind.
Once she can't find Jason.
Because she can't find Jason, who's gone to the bathroom, and her response is not in proportion to the length of time that he's gone. Right. He's not been gone long enough for her to flip out. But she completely loses her mind. And of course, at this point, you're thinking it's because when she was a little girl, something bad happened to her there. We don't know what, because they don't show it. And she's worried that same thing's going to happen to her child.
Right. So, but let's bring out the point that Jason is a special needs kid. Is he just kind of a little off?
Yeah, I think there's sort of an implication that he might be on the autism spectrum, or something like that he learns differently. Yeah. It's not clearly stated.
No, but the twin girls said to Zora, your brother's weird, and she's like, he's just uncomfortable with people, in situations. But he was very much a loner. He always wore that kind of that monkey Chewbacca mask, and he has this little flint. He called it a magic trick. That it must be like sparks or whatever, and he just constantly is playing with this. So somewhere on the spectrum, where the kid is just a little aloof.
The next scene is them back at their summer house, and Adelaide sees that he's drawing this figure that he saw, and it's the back of his own head facing the back of this character with the bloody, and that's kind of where they leave it, because Adelaide sees it, and you could tell a chill goes over her. Asks who he is. Oh, this is this guy.
I don't know.
Doesn't really give much explanation, because he doesn't know, who this guy is either. So
she's been completely tense since they come home. She keeps looking out the windows.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
She keeps pulling her sweater tighter around her.
She's closing herself off.
And she is almost to the breaking point internally, and Gabe is completely oblivious.
Such a great he plops his butt down on the bed, and he just kind of sprawls out. And the bed is tiny; it's just a little twin bed, so the two of them sleep in it. And he's just kind of like you said, she's facing the window. She's in her own world right now, and he's like, "Hey." He's trying to get her.
She, for the first time, tells him about why she was so cagey about going to Santa Cruz. She tells him about what happened to her as a kid, and he's like shocked to hear it because he had no idea. And she convinces him that she wants to leave.
She's also seeing coincidences too, which she thinks is building up to something. She feels that almost like she's back to the source of this trauma, and that this girl is coming for her.
Right. And it's so funny because she's saying, I feel that she's coming for me. And he's like, the mirror girl?
Yeah, I know. You don't, yeah, like, dude, you're not getting laid now.
Yeah.
He's sort of expressing disbelief. She's so intense at this moment. And this is the first time he's hearing of it.
Right,
So they've got to have been married, Zora's about 12, 13 years old. So they've been together for at least that long, over a decade. And this is the first time he's hearing of this. So you can't blame him for expressing disbelief.
No, not only that, it's not the first time they've been to the house.
Yeah, but they've never been to the beach before, right? I got that impression that she always begged off from going to the beach. Then there's that funny line where he says, well, I'm pretty sure I could take you in a fight. So if she looks like you...
He does that fake little punch to the jaw. And
she's like, not funny.
She would have stabbed him right there. Not funny.
But then we get into it, right? And this is given away in the trailers. This is the setup for the movie where, which is it though? Is it Jason that sees the family outside? Is he the first one that sees them?
Because the power goes out.
Yep.
The power goes out, and all of a sudden Jason's standing. He goes, dude. He goes, the power just went out. Go back to bed. And he goes, there's a family.
There's a family outside. There's
not a family in a driveway.
Yeah. And he goes and looks and like, there's a family in our driveway.
Exactly. He's kind of like, oh, okay, yep, you're right.
And they call the police. That's the first thing that they do. Like, that's horror movie.
Well, she's now losing her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And
she's holding the kids to her, like, immediately, like, come here. She tells Zora, put your shoes on. Like, she's ready.
Yep.
To leave at this point. She knows what this means and she's ready to go.
Right.
And Gabe's like, no, it's fine. Just stay here. So he goes outside twice. The first time he goes outside and he's like, get off my property.
Right.
You all need to leave.
Yeah. And all you see, it's important to note that all you see are silhouettes of these people because the lights
and
are
they're holding
behind
hands.
them.
And the four of them are holding hands.
And they are obviously a family, a man, woman, and two kids.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And they don't respond. And he's kind of like, all right.
Yeah.
He goes back inside and he's like, I'll take care of this. Right.
He's like, we got to call the police. And she's like, I already did. They're 14 minutes out. 14 minutes out. That's not going to do anything.
Now, he already complained. Like, you called the police. Like, the first time, he's like, you called the police for this.
And then he's like, we got to call police.
Yeah.
Right. He immediately changes tune.
Yep.
And then he says, go get the bat. Right. So Zora runs and gets the bat, comes back with the bat. This is my favorite scene, honestly, that he's in the movie, because he comes outside with the bat and he's like, now I told you to get off my property. And then he's like, if you want to get crazy, we can get crazy. And like, he's such a big man. Seems like he'd be so physically intimidating, but this character is such a goof.
Right.
You cannot take him seriously, even though he's like 6'4" and he's holding a bat.
Yeah. At this point, that mom's got a better chance of defending, of fighting off these people than he does.
And then they start to approach at that.
That's when because then all of a sudden and then the two kids just kind of like scurry away, and he's like, okay, and then the big guy just starts walking down to. Now he's running back into the house.
But he makes it back in the house unscathed. But then as he's holding the door and he's yelling at his family, the big guy that's trying to get in just takes the bat right out of his hand and
whacks him on the ankle.
With it. So he's pretty much defenseless now for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. So the rest of the movie, he's like, ow. Yep. He's like Peter and Family Guy.
So now this movie switches horror genres repeedly. So this is where it becomes a home invasion type movie, like,
and this scene is intense,
or Funny Games, or
this is
something
intense.
Like this.
Yeah.
So they come in and now they're faced with this family that looks like them. But they don't actually, I don't think that they, besides Adelaide, they don't really put two and two together, because it's like a disheveled, crazed version of them.
Jason says straight up, they're us.
Yeah, but I don't think that even Gabe is buying it at that point.
No, because he's like, what do you people want? You want my bank account? You want my boat? And Zora's like, Dad, no one wants the boat. Like, these people have just now broken into your house, whacked you with an ankle, in the ankle with the bat that you were going to take to his head.
Right.
Broke through the window. And she's carrying scissors, so you're like, oh, this can't go. And
and they're all wearing the same red jumpsuit. Yeah. And only one of them can actually speak. They're in complete sentences, and that is Red, who is Adelaide's doppelganger. And she speaks like she's always intaking of breath, and it like hurts her to speak.
Yeah, like
almost like she's willed herself, like somebody that's
gravel in her mouth,
willed herself to speak. And maybe she's taught the rest of the family how to communicate, because Abraham, who is the husband, who is Gabe's doppelganger, just speaks in grunts and noises.
Mm-hmm.
And
but they all respond to her. She will clap her hands, or she'll make hand signals to them, and they'll respond to that.
Yeah,
right.
And the one thing I will say is that these actors must have had an absolute blast playing these two completely different characters. And they're in scenes together. I mean, obviously there's a lot of over-the-shoulder shots of, either a stunt double or a replacement stand-in. But it's flawless. It's absolutely flawless.
And it's to the point where you don't think about it. It's not something that you are looking for.
No, because they are completely two different characters. And like you said, Gabe doesn't even believe that that's him. I mean, the guy, he's all standing, like a friggin' sequoia tree,
right?
Chest barreled out, and he's got the big burly beard. But only when he takes off the glasses, he takes off Gabe's glasses and put them on him. And then you're like, that's him. Because they really don't look like each other to a certain degree.
Because when Jason says that's us, Gabe doesn't even acknowledge that he's, it's not like he doesn't listen to it.
Well, I mean, how many people think that there's an evil doppelganger family of you out there?
One of the more pointed things that Red says when asked who they are, she says, we're Americans.
Mm-hmm. So what do you make of that? Because that I thought was a weird...
Well, again, that's something that will make more sense, as we get into who these people actually are. But it's apparent that they're there for Adelaide, because Red insists that Adelaide handcuffs herself to the table. She doesn't want her to go anywhere. She's got a plan for her.
Right.
While Abraham drags Gabe out the back to do who knows what after he knocks him out.
Yeah, this is interesting because Adelaide says, please don't hurt my children.
Right.
Right. She looks at Red like mother to mother type of thing. Please don't hurt my children. As soon as she says that, Red signals Abraham to take Gabe away. Yep. Fine, you don't want me to hurt your children? Yeah. I can still hurt your husband.
Right.
You know?
And then Pluto, who is Jason's doppelganger, we haven't mentioned it, has like a burn mask on. So like that a burn victim or a burn survivor would wear. He doesn't walk upright. He's on all fours, is Pluto,
very
like an animal.
Spider-like.
And Red tells him to go to play with Jason. Zora has already taken off. She's run from the house.
She was told to run. It's a game.
Is coming after her. And Umbre just stands there watching her, gives her a head start, and then starts after her. Now the boat comes back into it now at this point because you see Gabe kind of regaining his consciousness, and he's been stuffed into a garbage bag. Yeah. A very large garbage bag, it must have been.
Yeah. Like the hefty.
Yes. Abraham is driving the boat out into the bay, and you assume it's to dump Gabe's body into the water once he's far enough out. And
right. Up to this point, they haven't really caused any physical harm other than Gabe getting whacked on the ankle.
Well, no, I mean, he keeps attacking him as he's going outside because Gabe is on his back, crawling away from him. He's hitting him. You hear him.
But he's hitting him, but he's not like he could have just taken the scissors to the back of the guy and be done with it.
Yeah.
And then there's a fight. He gets out of the bag, and then there's a fight between him and Abraham, and he gets the better of Abraham.
Knocks him over.
Goes into the motor and then knocks him over. So Abraham's out of the picture at this point. You assume that he's killed him because you don't see him pop up again. Umbre And Zora, who has made it to a nearby house.
Hey, get off my car.
Yep. And
That was like
Zora's
Sonny Bono.
underneath it. And the owner of the car comes out.
Did you hear me? I said, get off my car.
And Umbre takes care of him very quickly.
I actually like that scene because it's one of those things where Jordan Peele subverts your sort of horror movie expectations, because they first encounter each other on either side of the car. Right. Zora's on one side and Umbre's on the other. And then Umbre disappears, and so you're like, she went under the car. Right.
She kind of lowers herself down.
And Zora, like, does the horror movie thing that you're not supposed to do, right? Which makes herself vulnerable. She goes down and looks underneath the car, and Umbre's not there. And then, the next shot, you see her, she's on top of the car. So even those little things where he sort of plays with your expectations of these horror movie tropes, and then he does something different that you don't expect.
And now once Umbre, her attention is taken by this new guy that she has to kill, Zora goes back to the house, and the family is now back together again. They all run out to the boat. What they're going to do is go over to their friend's house, which is across the bay. This is where we go into the very nice house of this other couple. Kitty, played by Elizabeth Moss, is yelling down at her husband to do something, and he's sitting there, and this guy is such a scumbag. He's like sitting there on his headphones, and he's ignoring his wife, and you just get a sense.
There's something outside. There's noise. I hear it. I'm getting scared.
And he's like, there's nothing outside. And then suddenly, this is the shocker, because at this point, and you've seen the previews, you're only assuming that these doppelgangers are for the main family in this movie.
Right. Yeah, this is pretty big revelation.
So this is the reveal right here, as that this family has doppelgangers as well. Elizabeth Moss shows up in her own red jumpsuit, and so does the rest of the family, and they just start causing havoc. Now, this is where I was saying how she's more likable later on, because I definitely
like the doppelganger version.
The doppelganger better than I did Elizabeth Moss.
This was kind of shocking, which was, you got the main your main family on the run, and they're like, oh, let's go to the neighbor's house.
And they're going to them for help. They haven't gotten there yet. They're on their way in the boat to come across to ask them for help. And they're getting taken out themselves.
Killed out immediately.
By their own doppelgangers. And the two girls get killed, the twins, by their doppelgangers. Everybody in red jumpsuits.
That's like the first shocker, because Kitty's gone downstairs now to say to Josh, go outside and see what's making this noise.
Right.
So now they're arguing downstairs, and the twins come out of their room and are standing at the balcony. And then all of a sudden you see their doppelgangers behind them. And so their parents see the doppelgangers kill their kids.
Yeah, I thought the doppelgangers were Nelson at one point.
Right. Or they both look like the girl from Night of the Living Dead, I thought, from the poster image with their hair hanging over their faces. So, the husband gets killed by his doppelganger, who is just as smarmy as the husband was.
With
slicked
even
back
more
hair.
So, with the slick back hair.
So,
right? Immediately takes his lounge robe off him and puts it on himself.
Right. And then Kitty gets it from her doppelganger.
And then there's this genius scene, right? Because they have this thing in their house that's like an Alexa type device that they call Ophelia. Yeah. And it had been playing good vibrations because Josh was just being obnoxious to Kitty and started playing the music loud. And she says, Ophelia, call the police. And it starts playing the police.
Right, yes.
So then we get the original family, Adelaide and Gabe and the kids show up. And they have a confrontation with these other doppelgangers. And there's a great scene. It's almost like Daryl Hannah in Blade Runner, where one of the twins is just doing somersaults from room to room to room, because these kids were gymnasts, right? And Zora is the one that takes her out.
Oh, badass, man.
She is, yeah.
She just...
Because again, it's like this scene is almost like they're reveling and taking out this family.
It's like
because they don't really like them to begin with.
It's like nothing brings a brother and sister together like a homicidal murdering spree. It's like yes, and all of a sudden the siblings, she's got the golf club, and Jason grabs the geode, and they're and they're stalking upstairs. They see the neighbor's dead bodies laying there, and they're like, "We got this."
The reason why they do that though is because Adelaide goes to the door, and Tex, as Josh, in Josh's bathrobe covering his jumpsuit, comes to the door and opens the door. And Adelaide says, "We need help." And then suddenly she realizes he's not quite right.
Who he is.
And they grab her. Dahlia grabs Adelaide and drags her upstairs. So now they're going into the house so they can get their mother back.
Mom. And this is the second time where Adelaide is simply handcuffed. She's not. They could have killed her at any chance. They're handcuffing her.
I have a theory that like the doppelgangers can only kill their own doppelgangers, and that's why.
That does make sense. But it seems that Red had a larger plan that she wanted
Adelaide
to witness to.
Yeah. Well, that would play out with the guy at the beginning with the blood running down his hand, right?
Yeah. I have a theory that they can only, they're only supposed to kill their own doppelganger.
Right.
They're not supposed to kill anybody else.
But us real humans, on the other hand, we can kill all of them. No holds barred, baby.
So yeah, Gabe gets to take out his financial rival, and I think that.
Oh, that's where there's a joke about a flare gun earlier.
Yeah.
And he's hiding in the boat, which is called the biatch, which I loved. And he fires off the flare gun, and it just kind of like peters off to the side, and he's like, oh.
Once they take care of the doppelgangers in that house, Gabe was like, "Let's stay here. This is safe." I'm like, "Well, they weren't safe, and there's dead bodies still here."
That. She goes, "They're still laying there," and the whole thing is just open glass, So you're exposed to the whole world. Everyone's going to know that you're in there, but they're sitting at the table, and that's when Jason says, "How many everybody's is there going to be?"
Right, and they watch the
news. And then they're like, "This kid's got a point. Yeah, up until this point, we just thought that it was us. Now it's our neighbors as well. What the hell's going?" And they turn on the news, and sure enough, it's a worldwide epidemic.
And they say people keep coming from the sewers. So there's your callback to Chud right there.
Right, and to the opening crawl, where it says, there's thousands of tunnels underneath the United States. Nobody knows
who's making all these red jumpers.
I know that's one of the questions that I had. But
Amazon.
So it turns from like a home invasion thing to like a Night of the Living Dead thing, where these the population is being attacked. And
you made that home invasion, and they make because Adelaide's like, "We gotta leave. Let's go to Mexico."
Mm-hmm.
And Gabe's like, "Mexico? We got everything we need here." She goes, "We'll set up some traps." He goes, "Did you really just reference Home Alone?" And the kid,
they're like, "What's Home Alone?"
Turns around, "What's Home Alone?" I'm like, that is the worst parenting ever. Kid's 13 years old and he's never seen Home Alone. Shame on you.
They do take to the road. It's Zora that's driving the car,
and that's great because they have like this kill count comparison now. All of a sudden it's kind of like this one-upmanship. It's like, well, I killed one, you killed one too, I killed two. No, I killed the other one. I had to go back and kill that one.
Yeah, she says, "I have the highest kill count. Dad's leg is hurt, so you have to get in the back seat."
Like it's a freaking video game.
Yeah, and again, like Jeff said,
maniacs now.
Like Jeff said, Gabe is completely useless since ever since his leg got taken out by Abraham, so he can't do anything.
He's in pretty bad shape though. Like his face is bruised. Like, and there's clearly something wrong with his knee because he is like when they're in the house, he has a bag of peas on his knee.
Right, correct, yeah.
So I just don't think he can walk.
Now I felt that Umbre was the scariest.
Oh, hell yeah.
Of the four doppelgangers. Because ever since I was in high school, I have been deathly afraid of teen girls. Just their fight. And it continues to this day. So I think that I'm just waiting to be insulted whenever there's a teen girl in some way, shape, or form. But I think that carries through.
That goes back to my my comment about the fact that these actors must have had an absolute field day because Zora and Umbre are two completely different characters, and Zora, while she's kind of resourceful in the sense that she stepped up to the game. This Umbra is just scary. Mm-hmm. I mean, you see it in her face. You see her in her body movements. Obviously, she has accelerated running rate compared to what Zora had. And she's just relentless. She's like a Terminator.
So when she's killed, it is such a satisfying scene.
Which is sad that you're saying that you're happy a little 13-year-old got destroyed.
But you can tell that she is the most threatening of this family, and that she is like the heartless killer. If they probably all are capable of this, but she is more. I mean,
Pluto had a little bit of a mean streak, but he seemed like he would have been happy just sitting there playing with Jason.
Like he was in his own way, he was innocent, Pluto, but not Umbre. So night turns to morning. They drive into Santa Cruz, and they turn the corner, and their own car is on fire, blocking their way. So they all get out.
There are dead bodies everywhere.
There's dead bodies everywhere. So
Yeah.
anarchy has happened the night before. These red-suited things, people have come out and killed everybody. And there's Pluto standing there. This was open to interpretation. They've set a trap. There's a line of gasoline leading up to where the car's on fire, and they've driven right on top of it. So all Pluto has to do is drop his match, and then they would explode. So Jason had figured out a little bit earlier on that Pluto is mirroring his actions. So Jason holds his arms out. So Pluto does the same. So he can't drop that match. Starts to walk backwards. And Pluto mirrors him and walks himself right into the burning car. And thus that character dies. So now all we have is Red left.
Yeah. Now
this is interesting though, because first is Jason figures out that it's a trap, because I do think Jason has some insight into the way that Pluto thinks that the others don't have necessarily with their tethered. But also this again is the scene. So in the scene where Umbre is dying and Adelaide gets out of the car and she sees her in the tree, Umbre still sort of behaves aggressively toward Adelaide, but Adelaide is reaching toward her like she has some sympathy towards her. This is a girl who looks like her own daughter.
Right.
And I think the same thing happens with Pluto. Adelaide gets out of the car and she approaches Pluto almost like a mother, like she's going to solve this problem. He looks like her son. And so it's sort of interesting in this scene where you see that she has this sympathy, at least for the children, that are tethered. Jason's backed up, right? So he's past the bumper of the car. And the scene is so great because this is, again, it's almost like a callback to Alien. Red is camouflaged behind the SUV and she sort of unfurls the way the xenomorph does at the end of Alien when he's hidden in the pipes. The movement is almost exactly the same. And she takes Jason. And
Peele does mention Alien specifically in the bonus features as one of his favorite movies. So Red takes Jason.
But if you go back to this, the fact that it was touched upon a couple times where these characters, these doppelgangers, were imitating themselves. So if that's the case, I could have just stabbed myself, and the doppelganger would have stabbed himself.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily how it works. Because if that's the case, then everything that the characters were doing, the doppelgangers would have been doing the same thing and wouldn't have been able to do anything else.
I know. I just had to throw it out there.
But Jason and Pluto, I think there's something special going on between them. But Red grabs Jason, doesn't even react to Pluto getting killed in that moment because she's got Jason.
No, Adelaide actually does more so than Red.
So what Red's intentions were, probably trying to draw Adelaide in, but she's got herself a second son in Jason there as well. I don't think that she would have hurt him. I don't really know. You never get to that point, but
no.
So this leads Adelaide back down, of course, to Merlin's Forest, which is the name of the fun house. And
which it wasn't. In her original, when she was a little kid, it was like some Indian spirit forest.
But it was still, it was in its...
It's the same. Yeah.
It's still there.
It actually looked like it didn't age at all.
And the one jump scare in that fun house is the owl that comes out of the wall. And, of course, she smashes that with a bat immediately. She goes through the fun house and into the back door, and she's going down into a basement. Now, this is where things get crazy.
So this is like sitting on top of a giant power station.
And it just keeps going down. And down and down and down. She's just continually going downstairs and sort of, through these tunnels and that just look, increasingly more strange. And then when you get to the sort of the bottom level of tunnels, it looks really a lot like basically every 70s sci-fi movie, right?
Yes,
like these
like
long white tunnels.
Right.
Yep.
But
and there's rabbits.
But the last set of stairs is an escalator, only going down. There's no escalator going up. So this leads to a lot of questions a little bit later on once you learn what the true intent of these beings is. So Adelaide goes down the escalator, and you don't realize it, but she knows exactly what this place is because she's been here before. So she goes down into the tunnels and she goes into what looks like a classroom with a wall of empty cages. Earlier, during the opening credits, you saw that same wall, and it was filled with rabbits, and the rabbits are
now the
just
rabbits are
running
all
loose. And Red monologues at this point. She tells Adelaide what she already knows, I would assume, that Red is one of the tethered, and that she was created by the government, I assume, in order to better control the populace. So their actions mimic the actions of those above, that they're created as clones of the people above, but without souls. I think what their intent was to use the clones to kind of be puppet masters of the populace living above, but it didn't really work out that way.
It's almost the opposite, which is the shadows that imitate the original source.
And it's like pristine white tunnels, as you said. In the lab or the underground facility in any science fiction movie would look like this. You get the sense that there's a doppelganger for everybody in the U.S. and that they've all come up.
And that's the one thing that we didn't talk about, which you do start to see that, as they're making their way back through Santa Cruz, there's huge lines of, hundreds of these people in red jumpsuits holding hands.
Mm-hmm. And this is actually the scene when they go into the classroom and Red is telling Adelaide, basically how she came up with this plan to free the tethered, right? And she says, it's our time up there.
Right.
Which is the opposite of the Goonies, where they say it's our time down here.
Yep.
So like sort of a direct reference to Goonies. Also, there's like a little Alice in Wonderland reference where she says they all went mad down here.
Mm. Right. Well, just the visual of all those white rabbits running around.
There you go.
Yeah.
And actually on the second viewing, I caught there's more than a few rabbit little nods throughout this movie.
Yeah.
Whether it's on Zora's T-shirt or in the the bunny rabbit painted inside the Hall of Mirrors and some of the other little stuff. But
yeah, everything has a purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then this is actually my favorite scene in the movie. Red and Adelaide start attacking one another, and it's almost like a dance, and it starts intercutting with the scenes of them dancing as children. And this is pretty significant actually, because it's the pas de deux, which is supposed to be a dance for two, but they're each doing a solo, but they're also kind of dancing together. And the music is like my favorite thing in this scene. My husband came home when I was rewatching this for the show, and he came home just about when the scene would start. I'm like, don't talk. like don't talk to me. This is my favorite part of the movie. I just love the way the scene is cut.
It is pretty impressive.
The silhouettes of them fighting in the hallway, cut with the scenes of them dancing.
Yeah, because Red has taken on dance moves. It's very operatic almost.
They do point out that Adelaide wanted to do this dance meant for two by herself, but she knows in her heart of hearts that she's not doing it by herself.
That's for later, Jim. That's for later.
We get the monologue, so now we kind of know, as Jess said, you're seeing like shots of them holding hands. So now we know where the Hands Across America have come through, because
and that's where she says we're Americans.
We're Americans,
right?
But they're also Americans because that's maybe a give that it was the government that created them.
Yeah,
that they're Americans just as much as the ones above are Americans. But at some point, she says that they were abandoned by their makers and just left down there.
And that's an interesting scene where you get the playbacks of Adelaide as a kid walking through the boardwalk, and you see her. People are interacting. They're feeding, a couple at the picnic table, feeding each other on roller coasters, and then you get it from Red's point of view, and it's just like these mutant people standing in a hallway, kind of mimicking what these real world counterparts are doing, and you're like, what kind of world are these people living in? It's just really
that's the question, because this is where it falls short for me. Just the plausibility of that happening, of them surviving down there.
No, I think you're talking about a doppelganger for every person on the planet.
I
And
think
they all
that
somehow rallied
Well-
behind her, that she was able to get.
Well, in the U.S., I think this is limited, right,
Yeah.
to the U.S.
yeah, I think so too.
But the fact that they
Still,
can't,
that's a lot of people, my friends.
but it is a lot of people, but they have no. It's like they can't function. You know, they're just doing frenetic imitations of what's
Right.
going on.
But she was
above.
somehow able to mobilize them. and
But
get
yeah,
them-
and if
but we
it's
find
the
out
entire,
why later.
but if it's the entire country, how could she, as one person, mobilize the entire? You know, that
Right.
was a stretch. But
I think you don't like. It's not something you're supposed to peer too closely at. You know,
But that's-
the same
but-
way, like the same
Yeah,
way
but
that
yes, but
that like
I
Jason
know.
keeps getting up in every Halloween
Yes,
movie,
but
despite the
that's-
fact that he's obviously dead.
We talked about Pan's Labyrinth, and Christina, you actually said point blank, which is the ending is vague, and people are like, all right, did she really die? Is this whole fairy thing? And you're like, that's the beauty of certain movies and certain stories, which is it's left up to the reader or the viewer to interpret it. Like, I would have liked this if they didn't give it some kind of a plausible explanation for who and what these people are, that they're government-sponsored creatures, and that they somehow age at the exact same. It takes away. I would rather just be some kind of a parallel universe and leave it at that. Make it magical. I don't care. I don't think I need it. I think it was unnecessary for him to go down that road and try to explain who and what they are.
Yeah, it
But
does
having
open
said that, I
questions.
enjoyed it more
Yeah.
the second time than I did the first time.
Right, because you start to see stuff you didn't see the first time.
Yeah,
No.
like I said, when I went to IMDb and I started reading all these negative reviews, and this is where people get in, they get stuck in the quagmire and they really want to. One of the review, pretentious, predictable, silly, stretched, unlogical waste of time.
Predictable, no. I
No.
genuinely
But
feel,
when you start
yeah.
tearing this down, and I'm reading, and I'm just, boy, I went right down a rabbit hole on this, and I'm reading these reviews, and I'm like, yeah, this makes no sense. It's stupid. So I went back to watch this the second time with every intention of kind of riding on that negativity wave and being like, this doesn't work. And like I said, I actually enjoyed it more so the second time. You have to just kind of go with it. And the story structure is unlike anything you've seen. And I can get away from, the explanation and still enjoy the ride.
I think it's a beautiful piece of art. And I think there's just such a reluctance to recognize horror as art.
As an art form.
And that's, I think, what he's trying to achieve here. Like, there's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of stuff in the film that you can read into. He's trying to make a work of art here. Like, this isn't just a commercial product.
No.
And I think, I'm sorry, anybody who says they predicted the end of this movie is full of it.
Absolutely.
They are full of it.
There's no way you could have predicted how this movie ends.
Once the ending happens, it's one of those where you're mad at yourself for not thinking of it because you didn't. You don't see it coming.
No, and
You don't find it out until the very, very end.
Right. It's up there with like Fight Club and some of these other twist endings
The
where
twist.
where you're like, I want to go back and rewatch it now knowing what I know. And
Because
see
you
if I-
still don't know what this Hands Across America thing, really means. Like, well,
no,
why are they?
other than the fact that it was on her shirt, and that became like a battle cry almost for her to.
Let's get to this then.
Right.
So Adelaide and Red have their battle underground, and Adelaide kills her. So she comes out victorious.
And finds Jason, by the way.
Right.
Saves Jason.
Yes, saves Jason as well. And then you realize, okay, then you're kind of putting two and two together. Like, okay, the rabbits are what they've been eating down here. This is their food source because
I love the fact that Jason brought a rabbit back with him. I did not catch that first go around.
So they're driving away, and you're kind of asking yourself, what kind of a world are they now driving into after this has happened? Because
you see the carnage.
Now not everybody's dead. Like the red jumpsuited people haven't killed everyone.
Of doppelgangers.
Because you see what you assume are police or army or news helicopters circling around this
and you
line
just see the line stretched for miles out into the woods, into the oceans,
So then we kind of get a knowing look from Adelaide as they're driving away, and you're seeing some flashbacks as to what actually happened.
The fleshing out that scene when she first
when she was a kid on the beach at Santa Cruz in the fun house, that they switched places.
Red, or the doppelganger,
Yeah.
choked the real Adelaide,
Dragged her down that staircase.
Dragged her.
Right. Put her in her
Handcuffed her.
place and then went up and took her place. And it just makes you completely, leave this movie with this sense like, who was I supposed to be sympathizing with in this film?
But that also, now that you bring it up, because she handcuffed her to the bed, so that's where the handcuffs play in, where she felt the need to handcuff her.
Mm-hmm. So, and she talks like that because she was choked.
Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, it's a cool twist. Mm-hmm. But to me, the motivation would have been, you stole my life. That would have been the motive. Like she came back and she was giving all this crazy speech, and it's like, now that you know what you know, I would have been like, dude, you know what you did to me. You took my life.
Well, she says that's what kills me. So I saw this movie in the theater, and then for like 3 weeks afterwards, I kept going up to my husband like, do you remember this in the movie? Because now you're just sort of like going over everything in your head.
Yeah.
And the scene where she says, I never stopped thinking about you, how you could have taken me with you. That line killed me once I realized what was happening, because it's true. She didn't have to put the real Adelaide away. Like they could have come up with anything, right? They
could have just come up the escalator.
Right. They could have just come up. They just could have they could have left the funhouse together, but she made this decision to like punish Adelaide basically for having a life, for seeing the sun, for sleeping in a real bed, for whatever. And honestly, like, it doubly hurts me because it's Adelaide's birthday when all this is happening. Yes. That's why they're at the boardwalk in the first place. Once you know all this and you start going back and looking over the film, there's this scene early in the film where they're approaching the house, right? And Red finds the hide key. And the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, well, she just recognized that it was a hide key, because those things are kind of obvious, right?
Right, the plastic rock. Yep.
But then you realize she knows it's there because it's her house.
It's her house, yeah.
Right. She knows that it's, that's why it's there. And she says, when Pluto and Jason go running away, Red says, don't burn our house down.
Because she plans on setting up shop there.
Yeah, living there.
Now, and also, you can tell that she is very bitter about the fact that Adelaide chose Gabe and had these two kids. But when Adelaide married Gabe, she was connected suddenly to Abraham.
Right.
Now she has to deal with Abraham, and now she has to deal with Umbre and Pluto. Adelaide has them as children, and they're thrust upon Red. Everything that Adelaide has is given to Red, but in a very negative way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in the last scene when, Adelaide has managed to finally kill Red, and Red is trying to whistle again, away the monsters, just like she did when she was a little girl. There's so many things in this movie that the second time, the third time, the fourth time you watch it. I was crazy waiting for this to come out on video after I saw it in the theater, because I wanted to watch it again immediately. Like, I wanted to go back into the theater and watch it all over again. And I'm so intensely furious that Lupita Nyong'o did not get nominated for a million awards.
She is absolutely phenomenal in this on both ends. My one takeaway, which was Adelaide is clad in white, and as the movie goes on, obviously they get bloodier and bloodier, and by the end, she's almost in red.
Yeah.
So I mean, just those subtle, like you said, you start tearing it apart, and could I have done without the whole government conspiracy thing? Yes, but it is. It was.
And what's equally incredible to think about is that she stayed in character when she was playing Red. So if you see her like in behind the scenes footage where they're not actually filming the movie, she's speaking as Red.
I would think you would have. I mean, that guttural voice that she does is just so unlike anything that.
But it's not even just doing that. She's Red when they're not filming. It's like
that's method acting at its finest right there. Was she also Maz Katan when she was filming Skywalker?
I would hope so.
Running around with giant goggles on.
Amazing. Obviously, they all are, because they're all, like you said, Jeff, playing such different characters as their tethered roles. Like the Elizabeth Moss, I think, also is incredible as
she
Kitty
was
and
very
Dahlia.
fun to watch.
Now, it really struck me, it benefits from watching some of Jordan Peele's insights on this in some of these bonus features, where he's talking about one of the quotes that I wrote down, guilt and sins that we bury deep within. The tethered are almost like your skeletons in your closet, like that everybody has like a bad side or like a perceived bad side to them that they keep buried. And this is that personified in this movie. So there is a lot, and I've only seen this once. So I think that my perception would be favorably changed the more and more that I see this. And after we've talked on this, I do want to go back and watch it again.
I like films that leave a certain degree of uncertainty.
Right.
And I do think you walk away from this film with a certain degree of uncertainty. And I think that if you're the kind of film goer who likes, to find those Easter eggs, who likes to interpret things for yourself, then you're really going to like this movie. But if you're the kind of person who wants everything like on a platter for you and like, here's all the answers, this is not the movie for you. And, Jeff talked about people making weird comments. I did see when the film came out, some people apparently thought at the end of the movie that Jason had been switched with Pluto. I was like, do you people realize that Pluto had burns on his face?
Interesting.
Like, even if somehow Pluto survived the burning by the car,
he ain't looking like his counterpart.
He doesn't look like Jason.
No.
Like, that's not a mistake there.
And that's interesting because that very last shot where they're in the vehicle in Adelaide is driving, and Jason is in the front seat. He's got the rabbit, and that's where you get the flashbacks, and you realize that she is the doppelganger. She's just looking at him, but he's looking at her like he's looking right through her. Like he's looking at her like, I know what you're up to. I know what your game is. And then she just gives him this kind of wry smug.
Right. But that's still his mother. It's still.
Oh, hell yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think
regardless.
Again, that's sort of that thing where Jason, learns and perceives a little bit differently from everyone else. So he's.
Yeah. Like you said, he had that perception level just with his connection with Pluto. But just talking right now, I think I've already gone up like one bucket.
The whole reason for the Hands Across America thing, as Jeff, you pointed out, was her T-shirt before she won the Michael Jackson T-shirt to go over it. So she's been ruminating on this T-shirt and the idea of this for years since she was a kid. So this is how she's going to make her statement when all the tethered come across, so they can band together. And that's
because that is the whole point. The purpose of the Hands Across America was that we were going to unite as one.
The scissors too, because she makes the little paper dolls.
That
look like the Hands Across America.
Yes, yeah.
And then the, of course, as I referenced earlier, the homeless man who sort of got in place a little too early. He's standing there with his arms out because he's waiting for people to come and hold them.
Hold them, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he's bleeding, obviously, because he had killed the guy that we saw in the ambulance.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on there. And again, you can either watch it for, at face value and take it for what it is and be mad that, it was all a government conspiracy cover up, or you can dig deeper.
I think that honestly, the fact that it is a more overt horror movie than Get Out is one of the reasons why it wasn't recognized. I think when awards season came around, because I know that Lupita Nyong'o got the Screen Actors Guild Award, but that was the one major award in the U.S. that it was nominated for. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. There's sort of this reluctance to acknowledge horror as art.
Although it does, it does have those elements to it, which is great about it. It brings all these elements from various movies.
Right.
And it gives you the scares, but it makes you think.
And it subverts them all.
Yeah.
Yes.
What buckets are we going to give?
I want Christine up front.
Yeah.
So, we know when we talked about our favorite movies of the year, we did that episode.
Yes.
I said this had been my favorite movie, but I was going to see Parasite the next day.
And there's some little parallels going on there.
Yeah,
with the upper class, lower class kind of.
I think there are
haves and have-nots.
So But ultimately, in the end, yes, Parasite does sort of edge out Us for me. But I would say, for me, this would be like 4 3/4. It's about as close as you can get to a 5 without being a 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I thought about this movie nonstop
Yeah.
after I saw it. And every time I watch it, I see something else. And for me, that's the hallmark of a great movie, that you can just keep going back to it, and every time you're going to get something else out of that experience.
Yeah, I'm really happy I saw it for a second time too. I'll go 4 1/4.
See, I've only seen it once, so I'm going to go 3 3/4 on this.
Fair.
Because I want to see it again. Now that we've talked this through, I actually can't wait to see it again.
Yeah.
My judgment is still clouded by thinking about what if, how did they do this and how did they do
I know.
that?
Yeah,
I know.
Like I said, you can get stuck in that quagmire because I was ready to go down that road.
But
just to be adversarial.
Yeah. But no. And again, even we've said this before, it may sound underwhelming to give something a 3 or between a 3 and a 4, but a 3 is
it's still a good movie.
A solid score for so yeah, and it can only go, and I agree, it can only get better with
it is something
increased viewing. So after Us, our second feature, I think feels like a real come down.
Come on, I loved it. You're now in my wheelhouse.
But wait. Before we get too heavily into them, we have to go to the concession stand.
Yeah, I need
and get our sustenance because my throat is dry, and I didn't even do most of the talking here. So,
anybody want a cotton candy apple or anything from the concession stand?
Yeah, stay away from whack-a-mole, Jeff, because
whack-a-mole. Oh, I'm all.
We need to get on target here. So, okay, we'll go to the concession stand. We'll be right back.
Wouldn't some hot buttered popcorn hit the spot right now? Extra fluffy, extra big kernels of it pop to perfection. Then drenched with the golden goodness of pure sweet creamery butter. Can't you just taste it? We heat the container extra high, but you better buy 2 more for the rest of the family. Piping hot, golden buttered popcorn at the refreshment center right now.
And now, on with the show.
Okay, we're back, and we are talking about them. So, again, we didn't even mention, we talked about this last week, that this is a big themed episode, that this is Jeff's baby.
I kind of threw it out there as a half joke, but.
Now, I think 100% we're going for the nice visual, so I'm expecting great things with your poster mashup.
Oh, I did do a mashup of an ant.
Now, and if you don't incorporate
the scissors,
the dark side of the moon somehow into this mashup, I'll be very, very
you will be disappointed because I did not do that.
Oh,
so but yeah, that's a pronoun. It's a pronoun palooza, I guess.
Now, if there wasn't copyright issues, I would totally be playing the beginning of Us and Them right now, slowly building up into under our voices.
Can we at least play the ant sound effect? That is so iconic.
All right, so what we're talking about now is Them, which is one of the first atomic monster movies.
Well, think about it. It came out the same year as Godzilla.
It did.
Which is crazy because the parallels are pretty impressive.
Nuclear testing.
The whole nuclear testing gone awry, and nature is not happy.
Now, right up front, the interesting thing about this is that it's a black and white movie, but the title then
what is
in
up
color.
With that? In color. That was bizarre.
I think it was a stylistic choice on their part to really kind of make the title
stand
pop.
out.
Yeah.
But either it's a black and white film or it's a color film.
And this was meant to be originally a 3D movie, but they abandoned that early on. But there are a couple of shots, including this, and that title was meant to be in 3D. So I think that's one of the reasons
so having it pop out like that. Yeah. Interesting.
So released in June of 1954, and it started a wave of giant bug movies.
Well, actually, when you get to the end, it's almost like they're setting it up for like a whole series of these type of movies that they could just keep using.
But they all end ambiguously like that. What else is out there?
But like you said, this was like one of the preemptive, like first straight up monster giant creatures attacking.
Right. And, this is held in very, very high regard. Especially of people of a certain generation. Because, again, I mentioned I was kind of talking to people about us covering Us, And then, well, what are you going to pair it with?
Yeah.
Them?
Which is like, you guys are idiots.
But no, more than one person said, "Oh, that's a great movie. I own that. You know, that's one of my favorites as a kid."
Mm-hmm. And it seems like it was on all the time.
Yes, on Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning TV, especially in the New York area, WNEW, which is Channel 5, played this quite a bit, if my memory serves me.
I don't know. To me, it's not dumbed down monster. It's actually pretty smart for its time.
And I'd like to note that everything that you see here in terms of the monsters is practical and life size. So they didn't go for that very lame kind of let's film a real ant and put it, you know, in a life size setting. So we open in the desert of New Mexico, but there's a plane that spots a little girl that's wandering in the desert.
Look at that. There's our tie into us right there.
And they radio a police car to come pick her up. Now, one of the police officers that's in this car becomes the main character of the movie. For no good reason, he is promoted from police officer to official ant killer because...
That's so funny because we were watching it and we kept saying, like, how does this state police officer going all around the country, you know, like he has all this authority and like what the heck happened here?
He was just riding on the coattails of that lady scientist.
We see the girl wandering in the desert holding the doll. I don't know if anyone else got some Aliens vibes. Yeah. Right there.
Well, especially when you get to the flamethrower as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that is the weapon of choice in quite a few horror movies.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Standard fare, I guess.
So the girl obviously has had something traumatic happen to her because she's not speaking and
she's catatonic.
They're trying to figure out where she came from. And fairly soon into the movie, they find the abandoned car and trailer, which has been broken into quite literally. It's been ripped apart, the trailer, and tellingly, whoever broke into the trailer got into the sugar bowl. So because there's sugar everywhere.
That scene though, where they're like in the trailer looking around, James Whitmore's character is like touching all these things. And he's like, this blood must be 10 to 12 hours old. Like, how does he know the blood is 10 to 12 hours old?
And you know, he grabs it and he's manhandling the piece of clothing.
Yeah, apparently forensics was not at its height.
Yet the gun that he finds, he takes a pencil and slowly, puts
it to the
He's worrying about the fingerprinting equipment, right? He says we need the fingerprinting equipment out here. He touches everything in the trailer.
And at this point, they don't know what they're dealing with because they haven't seen anything.
But doesn't he say something to the extent of that? There's lots of evidence loaded with clues, and I'm like, isn't that the whole definition of evidence?
What?
So stupid.
And then they go to see, what was his name? Gramps, I think, in the old corner store.
Oh,
they're like driving back from the scene. They're like, let's stop here.
Yeah.
And they happen to come upon another crime scene.
And the store has been destroyed, much like the trailer has. And again, the sugar has been raided. And so now the main police officer leaving the other guy there. They find the body of Gramps, and he's kind of all mutilated, and he's down the basement. And that's when we hear the ants for the first time, the noise that they make.
Right, but Ed is going to die because they've been separated. And that's horror movie rule. Like, separation equals death. And like as soon as Ed's left behind, you're like, he's dead.
There he goes.
Yep.
Ed's dead.
And now there's tracks that these assailants have left that nobody can really pick up on. Now, no, this was like a Bigfoot situation where they actually did a plaster cast in the sand.
I know. I was gonna say the sand's blowing, and it's like those footprints wouldn't have lasted.
And they send it out, and we get both Doctors Medford, the old man and his daughter, the two experts, and they identify this track as an ant track. So,
well, they won't say it first. They're like, well, it seems like it's this, and he's kind of talking
coy about it.
Yeah, he's talking to his daughter and like, scientists speak, like, and everyone around him's going, well, Doc, do you have a theory? And he's like, well, I'm reluctant to say because it sounds nuts, right? To be like, this is a giant ant trap.
The doctor was driving me nuts because I'm like, he's like John Hammond from Jurassic Park, but it's the actor who played Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, Edmund Gwynn.
But we didn't mention James Arness is in this as the FBI agent.
On vacation. How
who
convenient.
so famously played the Thing from Another World in the Howard Hawks version of The Thing.
Right, and he's wearing the most ill-fitting suit I've ever seen.
He's on his way to a Talking Heads concert.
Like, his tie is really short, even for an era with short ties. Like, his tie ends, like, at the bottom of his ribs. He's got this jacket that's too big for him. It doesn't match his pants. Like, for the duration of the film,
he was on vacation.
I'm like, who dressed this guy?
Yeah, and when did field operators stop wearing
Maybe
suits?
they didn't have big and tall shops back then. It's like,
big and
but
not
he
so
is,
tall.
I'm wondering, because he is so much bigger than anybody else. Like he is. And I have a feeling that people were probably standing on boxes anyway when they were in shots with him, but it didn't work. So he just towers over everybody else. So this team, this intrepid team, are our heroes. It sets out. So the two doctors, the old man and his daughter, the state police trooper who is
Ben
either
Peterson.
off duty or he has been promoted, and then we've got Agent Graham, who is James Arness. Now the ants make a relatively early appearance here because they all go out to the desert and they're looking around the original crime scene of the trailer. And was there her name Jan? I think her name was Pat.
So close.
I knew it was 3 letters. She wanders
Eve.
off, and we get to hear that ant sound again, and poking his head. And this is where you get the main visual from this movie. I think all the stills come from this scene where she's
him coming up
cowering
over the hill. Yeah.
at the bottom of this hill, and the ant's head kind of peers its way, and you can tell about 7 stagehands are moving every part of this thing. And so they all fire upon the ant and kill it. So
hit the antennae! Hit the antennae!
Isn't it funny, though, that Godzilla has a similar way to introduce Godzilla?
You're
over
right.
the hill.
Godzilla goes over the hill.
That reveal. Yep.
And everybody cowers beneath him, just to make him seem more imposing, just because he's the presence of the hill.
I love that scene, though, where they're shooting it and they have, their sidearms.
Yeah.
And then Ben Peterson, runs back to the car and comes back with a Tommy gun. And they're I can just imagine.
Where did that come from?
Right? Yeah. That's standard issue as well. Right with the flamethrower.
Imagine him thinking, if you'd only told me there was going to be a giant ant, I would have brought the Tommy gun in the first place,
Damn. I left my Tommy gun in the back seat.
So with some aerial reconnaissance, they find the anthole where all these things are coming from. They find the colony.
Not the anthole.
It is a perfect circle as well in the desert, the anthole, right? So, and there's some nice shots of you can barely see the full-size ant kind of sticking his head out. So you can see some movement in there when they're doing these aerial shots. What they do is they throw some cyanide gas bombs down there to take care of the problem. And then they shimmy down, and there's a scene where they're going through the ant colony and they're stepping over dead bodies. And that's where they discover the larvae, the eggs of the queen. And the queen isn't there. The doctor works out that the queen has escaped and is going somewhere to set up a new ant colony. But where is anybody's guess?
Right, there's this Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom interlude in the middle of the movie where you're seeing this documentary footage of ants and he's explaining all these things about ant behavior. And I understand why they did it because this kind of information wasn't really common knowledge, but it kind of brings the suspense of the film to a halt.
It does. And the movie does not pick up. There's one scene in the middle where they find actually it's more than one queen. They find one on a ship out to sea. So there's a quick scene. Viking. There's a quick scene where the ant attacks some sailors on this ship, and then they make the decision to actually sink the ship, and the crew is expendable, I guess. At that
they have the one guy he had deep lacerations, but they never showed him. I'm like, come on.
But then we get, this is the highlight of the movie for me. We get Davy Crockett in a
I
mental
know.
asylum.
Yeah.
I was like, Fez Parker? What?
I'm like, is that really him?
This is actually how he got the part for
it is.
Davy
Disney
Crockett.
saw them
Yep.
and was going to hire James Arness as Davy Crockett, but Fez Parker caught his eye, and
how could you not
went with
miss
him?
This guy?
So he is. They've put him in an asylum because he saw the Queen Anne and 2 of her consorts flying as I don't know if he was a crop duster or what his story
wasn't he the pilot at the beginning or no?
No,
he wasn't. It was different. But he was old man crazy Jensen.
But he saw, they're calling it a UFO that he saw, but he's like, it was shaped like an ant. I tell you, it was shaped. It was 3 of them. They were shaped like ants.
At one point, then
they leave. He's like, you believe me? You're going to get me out of here? Well, just stay in here for a little while longer. Yeah. We can't let you out just yet. So that was the highlight for me, seeing him. But the movie goes on. It's like an hour and nothing happens. There's no ants.
The old lady's crying because her kids are messing with her husband, but she doesn't know where they went. And they're just like staring at her while she's crying. Like, and yet they somehow bring her along to the crime scene later.
Right. Maybe you could show some human sympathy for this woman who's lost her husband and children.
Right.
But they're able to figure out, that the crazy man from his hospital room has seen these things come and go. And they deduct that they're using the aqueducts, which just immediately take me to Grease Lightning.
Grease, yes.
Right? And that there's these, again, tie into us, underground subway tunnels, drainage ditches, whatever you want to do. Then more than likely there's a nest in there.
Right. So again, like you got that kind of Aliens vibe.
Oh yeah, especially when you bring in the flamethrower. Yeah.
So now all the authorities of Los Angeles converge on the drainage, the concrete drainage canyon of the offshoot of the Los Angeles River, and so these drainage tunnels are under the city, and that's where they figure the ants are. So they go through tunnel by tunnel, and there's a line of guys that they drive their Jeeps in there, and this is like all in the last 10 minutes, not even. This is like whenever you see a Godzilla movie and it's just like that 10-minute footage of all the army vehicles. Because, as they enter the tunnel, I just, out of curiosity, hit my DVD to see how much time left, and it's like 5 minutes. I'm like, 5 minutes? They're going to wrap this up in 5 minutes?
But there's a lot that goes on in the last 5 minutes. So it's all out war, baby.
They blow the ants to smithereens. These ants are not impervious to bullets or human weapons. No. And they find the queen, and the queen and her two. It wasn't 3 queens. It was just 2 male ants that also had wings that were kind of along with the queen. And they kind of dwell on them for a second and then burn them. And that's the end. Like the end as they're burning, right? So it's like, get these audiences out of here and get the next show in.
Right.
So,
I mean, Peterson does find the kids before that. And he
he does.
Yeah.
Ben, poor Ben.
Like, saving their lives. Those kids cracked me up because, like, there's a scene of the 2 of them standing against the wall, and the ants are right there. And one of the kids is clearly trying to act. He looks scared. And the other kid is staring into space like who talked me into this?
Right.
Someone told me this was going to be fun. It's boring.
Right. Yeah. But Jim, you mentioned the fact that these are all practical ants. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, there was only 3 that were fully built, completely full built. So you never really saw more than 3 in a frame at a time. But they were burning these. They were catching them on fire. So these props were destroyed at the end to make this movie. There is no ant in the Museum of Natural History.
I read that there was a gaffe in the original cut where there was an ant, even though it's brief. They filmed the wrong side of it. So it was like filming Bruce, but from the opposite end, the hollow end.
Oh, gotcha.
And they obscured that on all the DVD releases. So you could only see that in the initial release.
The theater.
Yeah. But some interesting side notes that we already mentioned that Fess Parker got his Davy Crockett gig from Walt Disney seeing this. Also, James Arness got Gunsmoke from this movie. John Wayne saw them and recommended to the producers of Gunsmoke that they hire him as I think Matt Dillon was, or Marshall Dillon.
Marshall, Matt, okay.
So he did that for 20 years, did James Arness. And it's important to note that The Thing from Another World is 3 years previous to that.
Oh, okay.
So he was already The Thing when this came out. The sound of the ants were made by 3 different bird calls mixed with a tree frog.
Nice. This actually won a Golden Reel Award for Best Sound Editing, too. So
I assume that was based on the call of the ants.
I would assume so. That's about the only noise you get going on in there.
Yeah.
Although this movie employs the Wilhelm more than I've ever heard any other movie. Are you
3 times I think.
Right.
They used it, that scream.
Are you familiar with that is,
Christina?
Yeah. Any of our listeners who don't know, it's the famous scream sound effect. I think it was like for a Cowboys movie, it's referred to as the Wilhelm.
Goofy does it all the time in Goofy cartoons. Yeah.
And of course, Van Morrison's band, Them, was named after this movie as well.
Wow. I have a note that Leonard Nimoy was in this.
He is.
He is. Yeah.
You only see him for a
hidden
second.
away.
He's the guy who collects the message. He's the army guy. I don't even know what his rank is. He collects the message like, oh, this is one of those things we're supposed to be looking out for. You know, they have like a flag to know any like weird reports of ants or UFOs.
Right. If anything like this comes up. And how come those old world telegraphs, they all look like a cut and paste ransom note. Right? It was like, we're holding your ants captive. It's still fun. I enjoyed it.
So my memory of this is better than the reality. It's just too slow.
Movie.
It's too slow, though. There's precious little of these monsters in this movie. But again, when you were a kid, beggars can't be choosers. You took what you got.
Yeah.
Whenever it came on TV, I watched it.
Yep.
I saw it many times.
Yeah.
I didn't remember it being this slow, but I did watch it many times.
Well, there's a lot of action that's sort of like front-loaded, you know, in this film.
Like you said, you see them pretty early.
Like they're uncovering the mystery, and there's the scene where they're interviewing the little girl. She starts screaming about them, and you know they go to the nest, and there's actually like quite a lot of suspense that's built up to that point. But then, like I said, like after the point where the doctor sort of explains with his nature documentary how ants behave, then there's like this period where like the suspense just kind of like comes to a halt.
Drops.
You know, they could have shown the scene, you know, on the budget mattered, I'm sure.
Right.
And when I say my memory is better than the reality, that could be literally true because they used to cut these movies to shreds when they showed on TV. Yeah. So I think it's very easy to take out 30 minutes of this movie, say, and still have it make sense and show it on TV with commercials. Yeah. So maybe it was missing all this stuff.
If you never showed the scenes of all the drunk homeless guys, you would not lose anything.
Yeah.
You still need to keep that crazy scene with Jensen when he's screaming, make me a sergeant in charge of the booze. He's hiding underneath the sheets. You're not going to draft me in the army? All right, maybe you can. Make me a sergeant.
Audiences bit, though. They made this a hit back in 1954. So I didn't read to see what this would make in terms of today's dollars, but it did $2.2 million, which was a hit back then, back in the day. I read somewhere that it was Warner Brothers' third biggest movie that year. So that's saying something.
Yep.
All right. Well, what kind of buckets would we afford to them? I'll start. I'll maybe set the bar pretty low.
Low.
I would give it 2. I would give it 2.
Wow, 2. I'll have to go at least 3 because I enjoyed it.
I mean, I was going to say 3 also. I think possibly because with this kind of movie, even if you don't necessarily enjoy it for what it is, I confess that my husband and I act a lot like Tom Servo and Crow when we're watching these movies. So like we get a lot of peripheral enjoyment out of commenting on the film. So I would say 3 for the entertainment value that we provide to ourselves.
It is a product of its time.
Yes, it is.
It was a precursor to
I really had a hard time staying awake during the second half of this movie, really. But I soldiered through.
I was riveted.
We got a confessional to ask of ourselves.
Confessionals.
Now, this is Christina's, so take it away.
It occurred to me because I was thinking about us, and so this is relevant for me to the first film of our discussion today, and it was, is there a scene in a film that was so beautiful that it literally brought you to tears? Not that you sobbed because there was something emotional happening, but just that the film, something that you saw on screen sort of impacted you to that point where it drew up like a really strong emotion. And because it's my confessional, I'll tell you that it was the pas de deux scene in Us. Again, I know that seeing this on the small screen doesn't have quite the same impact, but when I was in the theater and you're in the darkened theater and that music is booming And, you know, like I said, the two of them fighting in the hallway, the way it was choreographed and like edited with their dance, I actually just found tears in my eyes. To me, it was so beautiful, but not in the way that you normally think of beauty on film.
Now that you've seen it more than once, there's an added layer to this when you realize that Adelaide knows that there is red. So it's not really a dance alone. So does it make you more emotional knowing that? Yeah.
It does. And that's why, like I said, when my husband came home when I was rewatching, I was like, don't speak to me. Like, I need to be alone with this movie right now. So what about you guys?
I fell flat on this one, so go ahead, Jim.
You fell flat on this one.
I had a hard time coming up with something.
I'm going to take this opportunity to get back on my soapbox that I take out every once in a while. And I would like to reveal, and I know that there's an industry name for this, although I couldn't find it for the life of me, the manipulative act of filmmakers showing a very bright light after an emotional scene to get you to tear up. They even did it in 1917 when our main character in 1917 meets his friend's brother at the very end of the movie. Tells him, and which is an emotional scene by itself. Doesn't need any help from any outside sources. But he's asking him, "Can I contact your mother to tell her how he died?" And they part ways. He turns around and walks out into a field. The sun is so bright that you're already emotional, and it is manipulating you physically to start tearing because they're showing you a bright light. And I notice this every time, and it's done quite a bit. And I would just like to ask filmmakers to stop. If your movie cannot create emotion already, then don't force it upon me by
being manipulated from the time you go inside the theater.
I've named it whitewashing. I call it that. I've given it a term. But now that let me step down off of my soapbox and give you an instance where I was actually emotional, and not because they've shown me a bright light. And it wasn't so much because of the visual. And I think anybody that's seen this movie will agree with me. The end of Toy Story 3. When Andy is given the toys and he's driving away. And you can interpret this so many ways as, if you're somebody that was so attached, and like we all are so attached to our childhood, he's leaving that behind. And then if you're a parent, you can see this as your son or daughter getting old and leaving childhood behind. It's affecting you on so many levels that you're a mess by the end of this scene and by the end of this movie. And it's just like the car driving away is the nail in the coffin. You're done. You're done.
Well, when he starts playing with her with the Bonnie and the toys, you're like, dude, you're gonna be buying those on eBay 20 years from now for like a ridiculous amount of money.
And let me point out, no bright light whatsoever at the end of Toy Story 3.
Sometimes if I even think about the end of Toy Story 3, I just start crying. Why did you just think about the end?
You're right. Yeah, I will tell you, my son had a birthday party, and I went and I sat like 2 rows behind the boys in this thing, and I bawled my eyes out. And my son to this day brings it up. He's like, Dad, don't watch it. You're going to cry. So, but to that end, I do have a movie, which is I can watch the last 5 minutes of it and cry hysterical. And again, if I think about it, I probably break down and start crying right now, which is E.T.
Well, yeah.
I mean, but that's not a beautiful. I got what your confessional was, and I really had a hard time kind of locking onto it. But a more recent, I tend to get very overwhelmed with emotion when I'm happy, when I'm experiencing something not sad, but it's just hitting my sweet spot, and I can't control it. I was once at Six Flags back in the 80s, and it was a live Batman show, and it was just like it just hit me like this is the greatest thing in the world. Like it was so stupid. But I will say, when I sat down to watch Rise of Skywalker and the Star Wars logo bursts onto the screen with the crescendo of that John Williams score, I lost it. I absolutely lost it. And again, it's tying back, not necessarily, it's not, it's type on a black screen. It's not beautiful. It's not, we're not talking about cinematography. You're not talking about any character. It's just a deeply rooted emotional connections that I have with that franchise. So But yeah, I felt like I didn't really step up for this one. So
I thought that you would have like something from an animated film.
There are some. Lilo and Stitch is probably one that it's if you want to go down that road, which is when he just he says Ohana is family.
Yeah.
You know, and it just and it just hits you right in the feels because it's I got goosebumps. Because that's a movie we will be talking about it one day because I think it's completely underrated. And again, I have friends who were like,
"Yeah, it is. It's cartoon." Because Pixar was really taking over at that point, and I think
and it was unlike anything that Disney had really done. It doesn't follow any kind of standard story structure.
It's something else just occurred to me. Continue.
No.
It was like I had an epiphany for this. That WALL-E. That scene where they're dancing in space.
Oh, in space.
The fire extinguisher. Yes. That is beautiful. And the music, that makes me choke up every time.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing I think I was, hoping like you guys would go for. Just something that not necessarily something that's meant to make you sad like the end of Toy Story, but something that just sort of struck you and you had such an emotional resonance. It was so unexpected, and that was what happened to me when I saw Us, because I just felt so overwhelmed by that whole sequence, and it was such a surprise to me to feel that way in that moment. You're not supposed to tear up, you're supposed to be frightened or whatever,
repulsed, I guess. I don't know.
But that it was, to me, it was so intensely beautiful that I just found myself crying and I couldn't figure out why.
I don't know if this scene ever brought me to tears, but in that same vein, in Legend, Ridley Scott's movie, where Lily is dancing in Darkness's castle with the darkness, and she becomes one with it, and then he emerges from that mirror.
Well, that's completely tied in with that Tangerine Dream score for me.
Yeah.
And that scene is gorgeous.
Yes, and that is. So I guess we probably could hit on. I could probably hit every movie and tell you at least one point in it that was just kind of made me feel the feels.
So that was our confessional. But next week we are going back to the movies, to a recent theatrical release. Birds of Prey.
Recent. It's like it just dropped yesterday.
Well, we're on the cusp. We are on the cutting edge.
Right.
So.
We want to.
Now, I have not seen Suicide Squad.
I don't think you need to see Suicide Squad.
I haven't seen
Harley
it
Quinn
either.
pretty much told you in the opening trailer, me and Mr. J broke up. So that's all you need to know. There's no Joker.
It's like Annie Potts in Corvette Summer all over again.
Yeah, basically.
It's not even your car! Very few of you, I feel, are going to even know what this movie is when I talk about our co-feature next week. We are digging deep.
We need to spread the love on this. I can honestly tell you I've probably never seen this.
Well, I've seen it. Probably not since 1981, but I've seen it.
Can we unsee it once we see it, though?
This is a live-action Disney release. They were pretty early on into the superhero genre. They dipped their toe in 1981 with something called Condor Man.
Should I rent the VHS?
So again, next week, Birds of Prey coupled with Condor Man.
I see what you did there. It's a whole bird thing.
Hey, I set you up for your poster mashup every single week as much as I can. Best. So
yeah, I don't know. Us and them wasn't really.
All right. So thanks again for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Christina,
Bye.
Jim, good talking to you. Ciao.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, tmiconfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
Hey, you guys!